Good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome to this session with our writer from the state of Arunachal Pradesh, Dr. Mamang Dai. A warm welcome to you to Calicut on your very first visit. Arunachal Pradesh, a state that is probably the farthest from Kerala in terms of distance. I don't know how many of us have visited not just Arunachal Pradesh, but the whole of the Northeast. We have this tendency to see that whole area as one homogeneous unit, the Northeast. But you just have to turn the pages of books like the one that we are going to discuss this afternoon, Escaping the Land, to know how heterogeneous, how diverse these lands are. Apart from the 7 or 8 states that make up the Northeast, in each state you have so much diversity in terms of ethnicity, geography, history, politics, and whatnot. Well, if we haven't traveled to Arunachal Pradesh and discovered its pristine beauty, what is the next best way to do it? I would say it is through the literature of the land. And that is why it gives us great delight to welcome Mamang Dai to us, to open for us the pages of this grand epic called Arunachal Pradesh. To enter that realm, let me, with your permission, begin not with Escaping the Land, the book that we are going to discuss, but another work. It's called The Inheritance of Words, Writings from Arunachal Pradesh. And this has been edited by Mamang Dai. Permit me to begin by reading the first part of the introduction written by the editor Mamang Dai. Imagine a group of people huddled around a fire. They are shuddering with cold and hunger. One of them unrolls a piece of rawhide. In the fire glow, they see lines and scribbles. The wind is howling outside. Perhaps they are sheltering in a cave. The flames lick at the strange animal skin. It crackles and burns, giving off a delicious aroma. A man with a knife cuts it into strips. They eat it and continue on their way. It's a story that conveys much about the language or the languages of Arunachal Pradesh. This is a story of a story, one of many to explain the absence of a script among the Arunachal tribes. So we have with us a writer who comes from a land which has many languages, but none of which have a script. But they continue to tell their stories, sometimes through the Assamese script, sometimes through English, sometimes through Hindi, because as she has very beautifully concluded in the introduction here, so here it is. I hope the reader will enjoy this book. If we ate the words and lost our script, let us set the words free. And indeed, that is how we get to savor the beauty of Arunachal Pradesh and its literature. So it's over to you now to tell us more about this literature written without a script. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Bindu, for the kind introduction. Good afternoon to everyone here. Starting with languages, Arunachal Pradesh and much of the northeastern region of India, also across many cultures, I think there is what we have oral traditions. This is also there in Latin America among the Inuit people. It is usually tied to ritual and shamanistic traditions, which is also common in Arunachal, specifically because I'm from Arunachal Pradesh. And I think it's important here to talk about this transmission. Now we have, the Department of Tribal Studies in the universities in Arunachal. There are linguistic departments also. Arunachal has one of the highest number of endangered languages. Some languages are already lost. But the oral tradition, the orature, is still very rich. Maybe we are in the last phase of knowing about this tradition. And I write in English, so there's a problem here when everyone is talking about mother tongue and translations, how important translation is. Who will translate us writing in this foreign language of English? So there's something to think about here, but English in the Northeast region, I must add, is also a kind of regional language. We've appropriated it. It's become ours. I think many writers writing in English poetry. And in any case, Bindu, I feel all of us are kind of translators. We're translating our experiences, we're translating a story we might hear in a village, and then we're putting it into our works. This is about authors, doing double processes of translation. And mind you, I think the oral tradition is interesting because the word was so important. If a person said, I give you my word, it was a binding promise. You didn't have legal document. The word was the binding document. So I think that, to me as a writer, through the oral tradition, conveys what one hopes to move towards is this authenticity and, transmitting what you know, because I have both languages, my mother tongue and English, but what you transmit, how it's transmitted, and the receiver of that transmission, it's all quite a complex, long process, I think.
Indeed, there's quite a lot of transmission that Mamang Dai has done, not just as a writer of fiction, non-fiction, poetry, but also as an editor, enabling other writers from the Northeast, particularly women, to be heard by providing and ensuring for them this space for the printed word. And more than that, in Mamang Dai, we have a person who has donned many a hat. She was the first IAS officer of the state of Arunachal Pradesh. Yes, a big round of applause for that. But that realm of public service did not probably satisfy her, which is why she moved over to journalism, put in a good deal, or a good stint as a journalist, but moved on from there as well. And that is when, again, after donning the hat of a conservationist of biodiversity, she has now moved into the realm of writing. So, your work as an officer and as a journalist, we can see all that reflected in the novel that we are discussing this afternoon, Escaping the Land. Just as we do not know much about the geography of the land, having not visited the land, there's plenty that we do not know about the history, the politics, the way the state has evolved over the years. And that is what this book gives you in its pages. It is a novel where each character, in fact, lives a life that is decided by the history and the politics of the state. So could you tell us about how the history and the politics of the land has entered your writing and how you managed to weave through these areas to fulfill that creative urge in you as a writer of fiction and poetry? We'll come to the novel after listening to, these experiences which have molded the writer in you.
I think having been a journalist has really helped the writing process, because also by temperament, I like to research things, But I find if you're writing fiction, you don't need to do too much research, then you become very scholarly. You just need that much, and then you have to always keep that space for the freedom of writing, for imagination to take over, or people in imagined situations, or the reverse, something like that. But having been a journalist, this book, Escaping the Land, was always on my mind, because sitting in the Legislative Assembly, looking at all the honorables, I would feel everyone had a story, but there's no language or the wherewithal to be able to share this. So I imagined stories, and then you get into the historical context of things. And the title, Escaping the Land, was on my mind because there was a point when we had a lot of insurgency-related cases, and people who could afford it were buying land elsewhere, say in Bangalore, Whitefields, in Goa. But they had instigated something in some of our eastern districts. Arunachal is the biggest state of the northeast. I think my friend from Assam is here. We can actually swallow Assam if we wanted to. But it's also very remote, and there's, the population is quite small. But people were doing that, and then this title came. But then again, there was a turnaround, because I felt no matter how much you try to escape the land, the source, of your experiences, what gives life to your meaning, what gives meaning to your life, is something you can't run away from. And anyway, many people have come back also, having acquired property here and there. And that was the beginning of the title. Also, it deals with the kind of lost history of Arunachal Pradesh from our own perspective. I was fortunate because my father was in what is called the old Indian Frontier Administrative Service, which was the precursor of the administrative services of today. And in those days, we had officers recruited, from all over India. They were really terrific officers, very dedicated, in what was called the Northeast Frontier Agency, NEFA. So when Arunachal was declared a union territory with Northeast Frontier Agency, again referring to Assam, people were very put out because they felt this is a kind of in-joke that NEFA, the acronym, stood for No Entry for the Assamese. Because earlier the medium of instruction was Assamese. We had very dedicated teachers from Assam who gave their lives, teaching people like my father. They all grew up reading and writing Assamese. So that language was there. With NEFA, English was introduced. And the book begins with a little incident in a very remote area. The name of the place has changed now. In 1953, I think that was the start of modern NEFA, just after independence. A contingent of some 47 Assam Rifle personnel and officers were killed, attacked by the tribal community in a remote area and killed. The news, of course, sent shockwaves. Shillong, Meghalaya was the headquarters of, that province of East Bengal, Assam, the whole undivided Assam. And I think there was some talk like, where is this place? Should we bomb it? Who are these people? But that was the beginning of noticing each other. And that was when government forces and, some form of law and order was introduced. That was the Aching Mori incident. Not many people, even in Arunachal, know about this. Now young people are talking about it and looking it up. So that was what I was trying to do, taking the political growth of Arunachal Pradesh as well, right up to modern times.
Yeah, it's a novel that has a large span, I would say. You have the entry of a young girl named Maing, who in various ways, I guess, is an autobiographical representation of our author herself. Maing visits Arunachal Pradesh after her studies in other parts of India, and she goes back to meeting the people, her kith and kin, and it is through her story, through her eyes, that we get to see the turbulent past of this land. It goes all the way back to the time, the British era, the 1911 war in the Abor Hills, and then all the way to 1953, this big, again, a battle, a major battle, about which, again, we do not hear much about in the history books as we are taught them in school. And the various characters whom she meets, Maing meets, tell us the story of the land and how the people experienced the impact of the creation of Arunachal Pradesh from this NEFA, the Northeast Frontier Agency. Having, so much of historical and political matter in it, I would just like to tell the audience here, many of whom are students of literature, we are so often used to using terms like post-colonial writing, post-colonial reading of something, magical realism. When you think of these terms, you have some stock writers that you associate, a post-colonial writer like so-and-so, a magical realist like so-and-so. Let me tell you, you don't need to search anywhere outside India to find reams of magical realism, post-colonial history. Just go to a novel like Escaping the Land. And it's so complex, the life of the people. This is what a post-colonial identity would be. You have to negotiate your way through what the British have left, what the government of India, situated far away in Delhi, as is very poignantly pointed out in the novel, the Chinese on the other side of the border, and within the state, there's so much of friction between the various tribes. So I'm sure it's a very complex identity, as you find in the case of many a character in the novel, like Luthor, Lupin, Umsi, and so on. So can you tell us something about this complex life, which is mediated between all these different aspects or pasts, I would say?
Well, actually, it's just an attempt, I was trying to link the past, the stories of NEFA, what I know from, primary sources, and then to put it together. It's not the complete history. There are many things in between, but the British actually never really entered Arunachal and occupied it, unlike some of the other states of northeast India. So we were left pretty much alone. We were the wild north bank, north of the river Brahmaputra. And any British attempt during the East India Company days was also just to come up river. They'd meet some tribesmen and then they'd go away. They couldn't quite negotiate straight into the villages. But there was one officer, Noel Williamson, who began to speak Adi, my language, and he was friendly with the people of, some of the villages along the river. And he came up a couple of times. Mind you, this was the time of the inner line restrictions. Today we say, many states in the Northeast are also demanding inner line so that, we're not swamped by migrants and outside people. But actually, the inner line was not to keep people out, it was to keep us in. That was the original intention, so that we wouldn't raid the plains areas. So there's another, interpretation there of that, Eastern Frontier Regulation Act 1873, etc. People take it up in all sorts of ways. But nevertheless, trying to convey this, and through fiction, and it's also a love story, mind you. You can't do without love, or at least I can't do without, that empathy and feeling of love. The land itself is a protagonist, so that takes time. You can't hurry it up and tell people this is what it is. It's going to take time, and you can only write what you know and really feel about, I think. After the Achingmori, the NEFA became, it was under the External Affairs Ministry. So after that, it came into, Home Department, and that's when we had the Indian Administrative Service, and all that came in after the Indo-China border war of '62. So that is also a little bit related in the book, because the only records we have are from senior generals, the defense ministry. Some documents are still classified, but from the point of view of people who actually fled, who were already serving in these small pockets that under Nehruji were called forward posts. There was something called a third policy for NEFA, which would be an in-between approach against great assimilation, hurried assimilation into the rest of the country, coupled with a British policy of leave them alone kind of thing. So this was the thing people had hoped for, the development of Arunachal Pradesh. But then, of course, we had the China War, and then we had the very famous anthropologist and advisor to the governor of Assam, Dr. Veria Elwin. So people like that, I think we're still lucky we have our territory. That's what I feel.
Yeah, that's what, circumscribed by all these powers, there still is something genuinely Arunachal. Arunachal, the word itself means the land of the...
We're still here.
Yeah, exactly. And that is what you find beautifully narrated in this book, which is where I came across, I thought that the best term that one could use to describe the kind of language that you have here is magical realism. No case can give you the kind of magical realism that you have here, where a good deal of the story is narrated actually through stories. So there is a beautiful weaving of dreams, reality, and foretellings, predictions by the shaman, by the rainmen, and so on. So can you talk about this? You're talking about dreams, just as you're talking about things as they happen to people. So the dreams...
I actually met the poet Devi, Malayalam. Yeah, she gets her images from dreams, that's what she was telling me, with beautiful charcoal drawings.
Ammudeepa?
I think, yes. And dreams, you know, if you go to the villages in many parts of the Northeast, I think people sit out on the, you know, front of the house. They'll be recounting their dreams. My mother used to recount her dream every morning at breakfast, you know, that kind of thing. People have strange dreams. But the dreams here, I think the shaman tradition, which I'm interested in also, is because the shaman, in certain rituals, he is the only one who can chant the whole history of migration. And this is done in a very poetic language, which is difficult for us to understand these days. So I've been spending quite a lot of time, you know, just out of my own interest, and also because I think the real value of what we have in our culture, the traditional way of life that people talk about, the real value I feel is in the stories, because the stories as chanted have this really wonderful, lovely, it's like a big life-giving tree. Everything is interconnected. So you have, you know, the moral aspirations, personal convictions, questions of good, evil. It's quite highly philosophical and spiritual. So this is all chanted, but you have to pay attention. You know, I think someone had said to really pay attention to people and things, to those around you, is like a form of worship. And if you really pay attention, you find there's always more that you never knew anything about. For instance, I'm writing about, you know, shaman and the rain man. I'm putting some of my thoughts into his words, or trying to interpret his words into a foreign alphabet, into the English language. But we were at a wake, you know, mourning the dead. And in that atmosphere, everyone is a bit hectic and flustered. And they said, Ari, there's no wood. We haven't, you know, prepared the wood. So at night, you're not supposed to cut wood. And, you know, there are certain taboos about doing things. Then someone said, it's all right. You know, the bamboo is there. The bamboo never sleeps. The bamboo is always offering, you know, its services. So I put these kind of things creep in, and you won't find this out unless you were at a wake or that it had run short of wood or something. You'll never know, like the people who are actually living there and working the land. You can only guess. But that is also the beauty of being able to extract and use that relevance for your own life.
Yeah. Yeah, you just spoke about your mother. And one fascinating aspect of the novel is the presence of very strong women, both the ones who have been educated outside the state and the ones who remain there, the ones who've been there all throughout. And I would say I was particularly fascinated by the image of weaving, you know, the way it conveys so much in a very powerfully metaphoric manner. Again, permit me to draw a few lines of comparison. You know, we are so used to discussing the motif of weaving as a very powerful activity of bonding, particularly female bonding in Afro-American literature, in the works of writers like Alice Walker and Toni Morrison. And here you have exactly the same kind of activity, weaving. Again, there are so many instances in the novel where weaving becomes a powerful activity, at which point, again, a major turning point occurs. So could you speak to us about the activity of weaving, and were you conscious about the way you used it as a powerful metaphor, which is what it emerges as in the novel, when you wrote the novel?
Yeah, when the first novel came out also, The Legends of Pensam, I remember my editor was telling me, you know, you have very strong women. I had not realized because they were portrayed as I knew the women. They were based on women I knew. So I have to declare that I really have a good band of sisters, like relatives from the villages. They come to Itanagar sometimes. We're still very close. They're very funny. They're like iron-hearted. They look after you in the forest. And I can't take them with me here and there because they can't pay their fare. I can't pay their fare, kind of thing, but they give me lots of support. Also, they're a source of, I think, the people I meet in the villages, they are really the source of my identity also as a writer. Even shopkeepers, women selling stuff in the markets of Itanagar. It's all a great source of wonderment and happiness for me, and we talk at length. But weaving, all the tribes make their own cloth, and the weaving is done by women. Unlike other parts of India, weaving is, solely done by women, except for one fabulous war coat of the Idu Mishmi tribe called the Athonu or something. It's a really heavy coat woven by men, and they used to use, nettle, all sorts of things. It's kind of arrow-proof, and you can't cut it with a blade, with a dowel, that kind of thing. It's become rather endangered now. You can't find it everywhere unless you specifically ask them to weave it. It's like a huge space suit, They have new versions with thinner cotton, and this is worn during the time of a festival called Re Puja. But weaving, I think, as a metaphor, even in Manipur, the whole act of weaving, spinning, it's like the whole cosmic dance itself, spinning, making. And in some of our tribes, they believe weaving is so important. Everybody makes their own cloth. You make it for the men also. That one of the penalties of death is that it sends you to a place where there are no weavers, sadly.
So, yeah, it's a matter of life and death then, that powerful.
Mythology and stories. But it's interesting how people brought these things up to cope with the living conditions, the environment there, I think that is really, you really have to salute
So it's
all
both
these
a physical and a
ancestors.
spiritual need at the same time. Yeah, that's the beauty of it, So talking about the mythical past, again, every land has its own idea of a golden era, golden past. And we, of course, we Malayalis talk about an era when King Maveli ruled us. And when Maveli ruled us, the land was, it was a land of, perfect equality. In a similar manner, you have in the novel reference to the Kojam Koja. Yeah, could you tell us about this mythical past? I think it's a concept of a glorious past.
It's a story I had to pester our own Adi scholars. It's among the Adi tribe, Kojum Koja, is a mythical civilization, that was once there before. Something like, well, if you look at mythology, they're all kind of interconnected. Even, the hobbits and Tolkien and Middle Earth, and there was something before. So this was a place where people were living very happily until they made a mistake. They captured something, for one festival, and then it happened to be the son of the water kingdom. The king of the water kingdom. So there was repercussion, and then it becomes a little bit biblical because you have a great flood. There was a great fight, but there are bifurcations of the story where fire and water are always, at loggerheads. That's why fire escaped into the trees, and sometimes you can get a spark or stones. So I think it was kind of connecting things, the interconnectedness of things. When fire fled and hid among trees, you get a spark, that kind of thing. So I personally find that quite fascinating. But the Kojum Koja was depicted as the land of fish and stars. And then after this great flood, everything was destroyed except a lone reed apparently rose up. This is in that old language, when they chant. And it was a celestial bride of the Kojum Koja people. She had nowhere to go. She was the sole survivor. So she descended to the land of men, of the sun and moon. And, we are very particular about sun and moon being the representatives of the super deity that is invisible. People swear by sun and moon. So she descended and she brought joy to the world of men. The green embroidered skirt became the trees. Something else became the clouds, butterflies. So that kind of projection. People have been trying to draw this, but I think maybe it's better without illustration also sometimes. It kind of, brings in another dimension.
Yeah, heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter, right? Yeah. Right, it's on that magical note that I will invite the audience to interact with the author. I request you to read this novel and enjoy its magical charm. Can we have some responses from the audience?
Hello, ma'am. My question is not about the book of discussion today. I just want to ask you about the legends of Pensam. So you translate this word Pensam as in between, right? So could you explain this? Could you elaborate on this? What do you mean by this in betweenness? Is it like a liminal space?
You could also introduce yourself, please.
My name is Harsha. I'm working in Providence Women's College in the Department of English.
Okay, you're from wonderful, thank you. I think Pensam, I was keen to put in an Adi word, and I thought legends of Pensam. Pensam is that moment, okay, when it's just that in between moment people say, oh, I don't have Pensam, or I'll just do it, in this bit of Pensam. That's how they use it. So I've expanded that, and it's been widened into, where I've said the life of a man can be measured in a span of a song. So this again has reference to elegies we have. We have something called the penge, and people sing, the soul is guided through all the different stages from young child to, and the singer has to be very knowledgeable. Say, remember you had that piece of lemon with your mother there, and it's really quite beautiful. So, but his whole life is really literally measured in the span of a song, in this song that they sing during the wake and mourning, when after death. So I thought Pensam was a good word to use. And it can be the liminal space, just that that moment when anything can happen.
Hi, am I audible? Okay. Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Siddhi. I completed my graduation, my post-graduation and undergrad from Stella Maris College in Chennai in English literature. And that was about a decade back. But coming here today, it's such an honor to be here because as part of both my undergraduation and my post-graduation syllabus, we had to study you. And it feels amazing that I'm standing here today in my hometown getting to listen to you. And what I wanted to talk about was somewhere connected to that. In my undergraduation, we had your text under South Asian literature. You were a representative for Indian literature in that sense. So we had one text from each country in that sense, and yours was what was chosen for India. Now, when you're talking about your literature being representative of India, and when we're looking at how, when we study it under literature, we would obviously look at the politics of the land, your texts as a commentary on the politics of the land. But what I wanted to move away from, because this is what I would not have got in my classrooms, and I wanted to know from you, apart from looking at the land as, your connection with the land as the commentary on the politics, all of that, moving aside all of that, just how the changing land, because it is inevitable at this point, the changing land and how that is impacting the personal persona, your personal, keeping aside all the political, the changing land, and when we are not looking at it being representative, just you in your personal space, how the changing land impacts you is what I wanted to understand.
I think, thank you, Siddhi. Thank you. See, we are not academicians, writing when we write, we're just writing. But it's always good to get feedback. I didn't know about the, the syllabus, the curriculum. Someone in Yadavpur University also had mentioned that, your poems are interpreted to us by the teacher, by the professor, but I wanted to know what was the exact meaning of this. So I gave a brief explanation. She said, that is what I thought. But then, once your work is out, it belongs to the reader. They can interpret it any which way. So there we can't help much, telling everyone this is what I meant, because half the time you also don't know what you mean. You just want to express it in the way you think best. But about the land changing, yes, since this book by Zuban, the women writing from the north, from Arunachal, there's been a lot of young writers coming forward. The publication, seeing your work in print has somehow been broken, that fear, people are self-publishing also, young men and women. And Itanagar also has caught up Arunachal, the whole of Arunachal, with a lot of new road connectivity, a new airport. Things have changed really dramatically right before our eyes. It's become like little Korea or parts of Japan, the eateries everywhere. It's really caught up in leaps and bounds. So also with the literature scene. We have Arunachal Literature Festival, annual event running into its 5th edition now. So that is doing quite well. For myself, I'm still fortunate to have, the old compound. I'm there with my pets and things, but I have become, a little bit more active, like digitally. Google Pay and things like that. Maybe I should try looking at some sci-fi writing and crime fiction. I'm really interested in crime fiction, but I think it's the hardest thing to write because you really have to know all the back streets, where you're going to stake out, watching somebody, that kind of thing. But I think it's wonderful. Change is like a gift also. You have to take it and take the best, and make it work for you.
Yeah, wonderful.
Hello, Mamang. You just mentioned that Arunachal Pradesh itself is a protagonist. The land itself is a protagonist. My question is regarding how you view shamanic practices, oral history, the local stories, etc. in your textiles. Text originated etymologically from textiles, weaving. And we reach to hypertext. Intertextuality comes from that. So we weave and interweave. So how you weave the Arunachal Pradesh history from shamanic practices, oral tradition, and your local folk stories? That is my question.
I think part of it had already been answered by ma'am in the earlier part of the discussion. about how you wove, all these, the mythical
yeah.
aspects. into
How
your
you,
writing.
Yes.
protagonist, land as a protagonist,
yes.
as a magical realist motif.
Yes, thank you. It's, for many years I didn't live in Arunachal Pradesh. I was away, I traveled quite a lot. But when I went back, I thought it was a new field for me. Luckily I had my mother tongue, so I could get primary source material. And there were many interesting things that I wanted to look into. So it's not as if, everything came together at once. There's always a kind of, I think most writers are insiders and outsiders. There's that love-hate relationship, with your small town friends, family who are the witnesses of your life. They know everything about you. So you always want to kind of escape and find that space for the freedom of writing. People say now you must write about the politics, or you must write about the whole of Arunachal or northeastern mythology, but I can only write about what I really feel about. I can't do this kind of work that it can be done, but it won't be me, that kind of thing. But the land as a protagonist, it's just the rain, the ambience of the sky. You're there, you wake up, you see the mountains. And then if you really listen, then you'll hear something new again, which kind of gives life a new vibrancy and texture, just like new material or something, if you take the example of weaving. So I think this is how it works. I hope it will last.
Yeah, as a Padma Shri awardee, as a Sahitya Academy winner, the expectations are always on the rise when as you are probably experiencing. And I think it's time for us now to wind up the session, and let us salute the writer in
Can
you
I ask
as we
one more
wind up the
question?
session to...
One
Oh,
small
yes.
question.
Yeah.
Ma'am, how do you see the future of your language? Because you said it doesn't have a script, only oral tradition. So, what are steps being taken to keep the tradition intact? And also, how do you see the future of your language without script?
The future of the language.
Yeah. I think, already the young people are not speaking. My nieces, nephews, they're not speaking mother tongue anymore. My sister-in-law is from Chennai. So my niece, nephew, they don't speak Tamil, they don't speak Arunachal Adi. They're speaking a peculiar brand of what we call now Arunachal Hindi. Like there was a Nagaland Assamese called Nagamis. But scholars are working hard. In the eastern district of Arunachal, from Longding side, a young scholar, linguistics, he has also devised a script for his Wancho language that is accepted in the Unicode. And he was telling me that the only way now to save our languages is to record it. That is where you get technology. You have the use of AI, just record everything. Later on, whatever is necessary to be done, at least we'll have the reference material. So I thought that was quite clever, because teaching it through primers in school and so many different languages. But we have script for the two Buddhist groups in Arunachal Pradesh, the Mahayana and the Theravada, who use the Pali script. So there are, script tribes in Arunachal. It's just the middle belt, what we call the sun and moon, the Doni Polo belt. Majority of us, we don't have a script. So now we use the Roman script with a lot of diacritics, with those symbols and how many vowels we have. All those are being studied. Someone has also devised a Tani Lipi, which is from the Devanagari and some Mongolian script that is I think it's being used for adult education also because it's almost like hieroglyphics. But there is some concern now, I think, from the government and scholars also, and people are working towards this language, preservation. Thank you.
Excuse me, ma'am. Can I ask one more?
Please do.
Am I audible?
You are.
Yeah, okay. I am Ria, and I am a research scholar, and I'm so happy to be standing before you because actually I'm like working on like your works actually. So I'm so happy to be here.
That's really great.
Yes, yes, ma'am. So I just wanted to ask you like a general question, ma'am. So you told us that maybe you told us that the British like couldn't make it to the couldn't make it to Arunachal Pradesh, or they couldn't enter the state as such. But do you think like maybe the influence or the coming of the Britishers has like influenced anything as part of your tradition, or like has it brought any changes to your culture, or maybe anything like that, ma'am?
Not really visibly, as in other parts of the country, because they left no schools, no railway tracks, no monuments, it's just the land and the stories that so-and-so here we had, a big fight here, people put up resistance and threw, the stones, and they cut the bridges, things like that. But that is only now these markers are coming up. And another thing is the government has sent scholars to, the Pitts Museum and to dig up the Williamson records and things. So now we are having a new history being written about the martyrs of the freedom movement. So this is a new twist, where people are erecting memorials and saying that these were the freedom fighters of Arunachal Pradesh who resisted the British. But they were actually, to my mind, to be honest, skirmishes, just between people. It was not a war of resistance, actually. One priest was killed, 2 priests. That is a historical data which is just being revived now. And it was in the novel The Black Hill.
The Black Hill.
The story of a Jesuit missionary, Father Crick and Father Burri. And the novel somehow brought up this resurgence of, the Catholic Church is trying to have Father Crick and Father Burri beatified. So there's a lot of work going on from the church in Arunachal, the Diocese of Miao, and they have, it is a long procedure through the Vatican, and I understand, I don't know about it, but the book was written just to bring history as a meeting place, because a tribal chief who allegedly killed or was responsible for the murder of the priests was hung by the East India Company authorities, and I thought that is quite a sad story. He was in prison in Assam. So I went looking for this story, and that was the outcome. Thank you.
This novel also, the concept of time, there is a mention of certain tribes which did not measure time in the way that is done in the, what shall we say, the way we are used to it now. And the first part of the novel, which has my seeing, Luthor's books and records, and there is a reference to the calendars, the many, many calendars that adorn the walls, and the way those dates are all marked. I think it heralds a new arrival, a new concept of time, a new way of measuring time also. Isn't that so? I think that is definitely one of the remnants of the British presence, invisible presence, even if it was an invisible one.
There's no word for time in our language. I've put it in some poem also. There's just reference to, the way a leaf bends after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, things like that. So time is really, I feel, a narrative. It's just the changing words. That is my interpretation of what I think our people meant by the concept of time.
Well, we have 2 minutes left, and I think that is the time when we can probably get you to read one of your poems. Yeah.
Can I ask?
I have this marked because we are talking about escaping the land. And I came here mainly for the beach, to be near the sea. We're so far away in the mountains. I'm always longing to be near the sea. So this poem is, it's a published poem, not the newest, but it's called Floating Island.
Please. Yeah.
It's not very long also. The sloping mountain is trying to reach me, stretching down into the water. Dear one, don't go away. Rest, rest on my shoulder. In the floating darkness, a woman is asleep, pressing her cheek on my pillow, vivid with dreams. The birds of summer are nesting in her breast. Who knows which way the spinning current will spin? Farewell, blind mountain pasted on the sky. When the day is folded away, my heart clings to the life of water. Into the deep, into the sea green, navigating on the heartbeat, the lilies are shooting up like swordfish, and the woman is laughing, laughing.
Thank you. That was wonderful. I think it encapsulates the best of Mamang Dai. You have the forest there, you have the trees, you have the rivers, you have the dreams and the mighty waters of the rivers of Arunachal Pradesh. Thank you very much for this. I wouldn't call it an engaging session. It was a magical session. It has impelled us to discover Arunachal Pradesh through your writings and more writings from that part of India. So thank you very much, and we look forward to meeting you at the next Literature Festival. Thank you to the audience too.
I think Bindu has brought out the best in us, so thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all.